Good evening and hello, everyone. Welcome back from the holidays after our wonderful 2024 New Year. My name is Chair Mabobi, and I will be chairing the Ed Policy meeting this evening. We'll begin with the territorial acknowledgement. The Greater Victoria School District wishes to recognize and acknowledge the Esquimalt and Songhees nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. First up is the approval of the agenda. Would someone like to move to approve the agenda? And we do not need a seconder. All those in favor of approval of the agenda? And that is unanimous. Next up, we have approval of, oh, go ahead, Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, hi, Chair. I just wanted to check in. I didn't see Trustee Bio's vote, and I just wanted to double check.
I didn't even see that Trustee Bio had come in. I'm so sorry. Okay, for real unanimous. Thanks all. Okay, next approval of the minutes. We have the December 4th, 2023 combined minutes. We are only going to be approving the ed policy portion. Would someone like to move to approve the ed policy portion of the December 4th minutes? Moved by Trustee Bio. And amendments to those minutes. Hearing none, all those in favor of approval? Unanimous. Right. A4, is there any business arising from the minutes? Alrighty, moving on to B, presentations to the committee. We do not have any presentations to the committee this evening. Moving on to C, new business. I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Shelley Nemi for the ESLR report.
Excellent. Thanks, Chair Mabobi. I'm just going to wait for Andy to pull up our slides. Okay. So it's with great pleasure, actually, that that our group gets to present to you this evening. We're going to talk to you a little bit about the Indigenous Focus Grad requirement and the way that we're activating and implementing that all across the Greater Victoria School District. And we want to talk a little bit about intention. We want to talk about what does that look like. And we really want to hear how that's reflective, not only within classrooms, but how we're weaving in that from a community lens, from a school district lens, and right into the feedback from student voice. And so that's what you're going to hear in tonight's presentation. And so we're really looking forward to that. If you don't mind passing to the next slide, Andy. So one of the things that we really need to talk about is how does this all weave together? And one of the conversations that we are having is that as Indigenous educators, we've waited our entire almost careers at moments in time to be able to see this reflected within the public education system. And what does that look like and feel like? And then how do we support that and activate it not only from a community lens, but with the classroom teachers that are helping to activate and implement this for us. So we look at the goals of the strategic plan. We have to make sure that we're holding that into consideration as we're starting to develop and co-plan together with community, with classroom teachers, with looking at what's enhancing the student learning profile. What does that look like for us that's informing our practice? And then how are we doing that from what's coming down from the Ministry of Education? And so today you're going to hear not only from district staff, but you're going to hear from classroom teachers, and you're going to hear and see some exemplars of what's happening in the way that we're trying to be very intentional to be able to weave all of these threads that reflect what does that look like and feel like for us as the Greater Victoria School District. And so I'll pass this one more over to Andy, if you can switch the slide. You're going to hear today How do we do that from a community perspective lens? What does that look like? What is the context of the grad requirement? So how are we moving that through with community all along the way? So what does that look like? What does it feel like? How do we ensure that we're activating community voice through this and that it's reflective of our context within the Greater Victoria School District for the communities for which we have the relationship with? And so you're going to see that because when we started to navigate that, we brought community in and we continue to bring community in all along the way. What does that look like and feel like for you? Where would you like to be involved in this? And then that way they're able to give us the best feedback. And I think honestly, when we talk about community perspective, we're not doing that from a performative lens. I think that when we talk about being culturally responsive, as we are navigating through becoming culturally responsive as a system, we're talking about what does that feel like for you as community, and that they're able to voice what that looks like and feel like and how they've been involved in this. And that's what we should be seeing is that we should be able to go to community. What are your concerns? What are your considerations? Where are we going to co-develop together? And how are we going to support this work that's really critical for us to have a good implementation of this? You're going to hear about the shared responsibility and what we call relational responsibility. And that's really the conditions around what informs us through culturally responsive practice. And so today you're going to hear about pulling forward together and what community of practice is. And you're going to hear that this isn't new. This is continued work from last year. And it's continued work right from when we heard from the Ministry of Education that they were moving towards Indigenous focused grad requirement and how we needed to be responsive to that. And we needed to work with community right up front, right away. And so I'm really looking forward for you to hear from everybody that's here tonight, that's sharing of their time and with gratitude on where we're currently at. And so I'm going to pass this over at this moment to Lindsay and to Emma to help us start and position ourselves in the work today.
Great, thank you, Shelley.
Okay, welcome, Emma.
Yeah. Hi, bonjour, I'm Emma Milliken. I'm Anishinaabe from the Kettle and Stony Point First Nation on my dad's side, and I'm Scottish on my mom's side. And I'm the District Indigenous Teacher Consultant for Secondary. So I worked, before I had this district position, I worked at Spectrum Community School and spent about 15 years teaching the First Peoples English and First Peoples Socials courses. So I was a classroom teacher and taught these courses for quite a long time, but I was almost always the only teacher at the school teaching these courses. So it's been really exciting for me personally to suddenly see so many of these courses running all at once across the district. So like Shelley was saying, it's really exciting for Indigenous people. And I know this is echoed throughout community and families parents that I've talked to. They're really, really happy that these courses are running. One of the challenges of these courses is that they're largely taught now by non-Indigenous teachers. And so this has been challenging to step into this work. Teachers have had a lot of fear and just about being able to do these courses authentically, do them in a good way, safely for students, safely for anybody who they have into their courses. So the community of practice is an Indigenous Education Department facilitated and funded workshop series that is 1 to 2 teachers from each secondary school. So there's 8 secondary schools throughout the district. Then we have some districts, so myself and Colette Cristante from IED. We have elder and longtime, now retired, but kind of back, Frank Conabear, Indigenous ed teacher. Lindsay Johnson, District VP, is involved. And so we've come together 3 times so far, and we have 2 more sessions left to go. And really the focus for this is to give teachers a chance to collaborate. So to come together, they're already teaching these courses and we're just letting them get together and just talk about how it's going, talk about their fears, talk about what's working well. And then purposely give them some help from the IED perspective, from Indigenous teachers who have taught these courses, and to be able to just give them a chance to meet and to collaborate with us as well. ultimately, we also want to create a resource or a framework for teachers who are going to, in the future, be teaching these courses as well. And so that's what we're really starting to focus on now, is looking at how are we going to create something that's helpful. There are many great resources, like, for example, the Finesse resources are really, really good, but they're very comprehensive and they take time to go through and to read and to work through. So we're trying to create something a little different that helps teachers be able to step into this work in a really good way and to kind of alleviate some of those fears and address just from like real life experience of teachers teaching these courses, and seeing what needs to be, what would be helpful, what could be addressed, what could we create this year that would help. And so what we're finding, the main themes that are coming out, I mean, this isn't all of them, but main areas are just pedagogy, so approach into teaching these courses. How do we do it differently? Finding and vetting resources. So resources are always a big question. And just time and platforms for collaboration. How can teachers continue to collaborate to do this work? We have 2 sessions left to go, and we're starting to really get some good ideas going. And I'm really excited to see how this is going to finish up. And I just wanted to say that I really am heartened, and I hold my hands up to teachers like Holly and Lindsay, who you're going to, Holly and Georgina, who you're going to hear from in a few minutes, because this work it requires risk taking, and it requires courage, and it requires a lot of care. And so I just hold my hands up to these teachers who are doing that work of reconciliation each and every day in their classrooms. Miigwech. Haichkasiam.
Haichka, Emma. Thank you, Shelley. You can move ahead to the next slide, please, Andy. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Lindsay Johnson, and I am the District Vice Principal of Pathways and Partnerships. And this year, I also support secondary schools, which includes the implementation of the Indigenous Focus Grad requirement. And I have been a grateful settler on these lands of the Lekwungen people for my entire life. So the title of our pulling together sessions is a way to communicate and for people to visualize that really we are all in this work together. We all have a paddle pulling a canoe forward, and we need to work together to be able to move this canoe efficiently and effectively. And as Shelley mentioned, we are building on last year's pulling together sessions that focused on department heads, whereas this year our sessions are more focused on teachers who are teaching one or more of these courses. There was an investment of $25,000 that came from the board to support this implementation, which was allocated to support 2 of these pulling together sessions. So these are 2 half-day sessions of around 30 teachers from across our district, as well as $850 per school for resources. And these were to be purchased according to each school's needs. And teachers have been extremely appreciative of their time being valued with these during the day learning sessions. And so around teacher voice and feedback, it was really important for us to hear from the teachers around what they needed. So we put out a survey, and this helped our planning. And that planning happened with members of the Indigenous Education Department, members of the GVTA, and myself. And some of the themes of feedback, really similar to what Emma shared, are how to effectively weave Indigenous approaches and methods into teaching. Some tried and true lesson plans and approaches aside from those finesse resources, where to get support when needed, and then clarification of local protocols. So in the first pulling together session that we've had already this year, we had 31 educators participate. We experienced a territorial welcome, discussed local resources and kits available to teachers, shared handouts for reference. We had some collaboration time with colleagues, and ended with a really beautiful drumming circle and shared protocols around the songs. So looking ahead to our next session, we will focus on more time for colleagues who are teaching similar courses to collaborate, as well as looking at reciprocity and assessment practices. And I'm going to echo what Emma said. We have so much gratitude. The work is really being done in a good way, and teachers really want to do a great job. And we've been inspired by teachers every time we've all been together. So when we think of next steps, we know it's important to look into community and to create a localized context. And so first, we're setting this groundwork in our schools, and in order to continue to build community connections, and we want to include community voice and engagement. So those are our next steps in our continued work. And so that summarizes our pulling together sessions. And now I'm going to introduce two amazing educators. So you're going to hear from two wonderful and inspiring educators from Victoria High School. So you will hear from Holly Brooke and Georgina Hope, and they're going to share their personal journeys within this work. They'll speak to their class structures, approaches, successes, and struggles, and will also share some student voice. So I'm very excited to hear now from Holly and Georgina.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. So my name's Holly Brooke, and I just want to give you a sense of where I come from. I'm a second generation Canadian settler, born and raised on Lekwungen territory. And I spent some of my childhood living on sort of sandwiched between the Pakwachin and Sartlip Nation in WSÁNEĆ territory. And in quite a remote area. So I did have a really interesting engagement with the local nations there when I was a young kid. And my teachable areas are Indigenous studies and language arts in general. And I've been teaching in the district for about 13 years.
Yeah, my name is Georgina, and I come from the British Isles. I was brought to this territory as a child. My entire teaching journey it really began in relationship with Indigenous community and pedagogy. So I've woven it throughout all of my courses. I have taught art, social justice, gender, language arts, and I'm currently teaching English First Peoples 11 and 12.
Mm-hmm.
So just a bit about our journey. We actually met about 20 years ago when we were in our teacher training programs. And we really connected immediately over our shared commitment to decolonizing work. And so our relationship has just we've really been committed to that inside the school and outside of the schools. I was fortunate to be able to take the very first English First Peoples training back in 2008 in Kamloops. And I followed that up by taking Story Stick, which was taught by Dr. Lorna Williams and Butch Dick. And I've since run a couple of workshops up at UVic for pre-service teachers who are interested in these courses and in decolonizing their practices.
Mm-hmm. So I was thinking about, this journey, and I recall when BC's revised curriculum came out, and there were a lot of teachers were, there was a lot of buzz in the air, and teachers are very excited, but also really nervous. And there was talk, but not a lot of action. And it sort of became really obvious to me that I was going to have to take some initiative. And I've often been told, if there's something you want to know, you have to ask, and you have to take some steps. So during COVID, I went back to UVic, and I took the year-long program called Indigenous. It was the Indigenous Perspectives program, and it led to a 5+, and it was incredibly foundational and grounding, and such good teaching for me. I learned a lot from that program. It really helped kind of root me in this work. And so at the end of the program, I was asked to facilitate a Pro D-Day for the Westmont Montessori School, and to help teachers there become more familiar with the First Peoples principles of learning and how to integrate that into their work. So that was really exciting, and I think it was received really well. And I am currently doing another 10-month program through the First Nations University of Canada. It's a certificate program, but I've just really I just say yes to a lot of opportunities to keep my learning going. So this program has been really insightful as well. It's primarily rooted in Canada's colonial history, but right now we're learning about treaties more in depth, and then land-based learning. And we had Robin Wall-Kimmer as our last presenter last week. So yeah, it's great. Okay.
Yeah, so we want to echo the gratitude. We're both really grateful to be invited to present, share that we are really deeply committed to this work. We are very passionate about it, and just see, you know, as Emma, you were saying, like it's been our whole careers as well. Just to watch this journey, it's kind of feels like a day that we've been waiting 20 years for. And so we're just really grateful to be involved in it, and to keep being invited to these learning opportunities and to work in collaboration with some good people.
Yeah, and it is a really exciting time because I've taught the English First Peoples course 3 times in the last few years, but this is the first time this semester that it's a graduation required course. So now we have a whole breadth of teachers taking up the work, and so there's a real energy and also a real sort of a different approach. Like it's just so neat to see the way teachers are stepping forward. Some with more kind of background and preparation, others are really new to the work. So it is an exciting time, and it's great to witness.
Can you move to the next slide for us? So we thought, you know, we're English teachers, we were thinking purpose and audience here, and we were thinking you'd probably be interested in understanding a little bit about what this actually looks like in the classroom. And so when we were kind of brainstorming that, we thought, you know, well, what is it not? And the answer really came up, that we both came up with, is that it's not something that can be done just with pen and paper and a sort of standard traditional delivery. For us, it's really important that the course, both the content and the delivery, are really rooted in the First Peoples principles of learning. And what that looks like for us is that it's very holistic, it's inclusive, it's focused on community and land-based learning, and that we invite ancestors into the classroom.
Yeah, and both Georgina and I have found that utilizing the power of storytelling in the class, and creating space for that, opportunities by sharing story in circle, is really important for ourselves as teachers and for students to learn together. It's incredible what can occur through the sharing of stories, and just it's a very profound thing to witness others sharing their story. It's transformative, it's educational, and it really helps build that sense of community in the classroom.
Yeah, so what we find is that in terms of routines and approaches in the classroom, this is where there's both joy and challenge, which we're going to speak to later a little bit more. But this is not something where you can just take Indigenous content and deliver it in a colonial type of fashion. You can't just kind of shove it in there.
With like a quiz or anything like that. It doesn't work.
It just doesn't work. It's something that both the teacher and the student, and really the community that you teach within, really need to be open to alternative ways of teaching and ways of even being present, alternative ways of assessing what the growth that a student has demonstrated in front of you. You have to really be willing to experiment and be open, just really open to the spirits of the place. But having said that, it's not a free-for-all. Holly and I feel it's really important that we continue to learn about protocol. That's not something that we grew up with. So it's a daily commitment to that learning. It's something that, you know, part of the routine is also that we want land to be part of a regular part of the course. Things like finding ways to have circle, ways of responding to student initiative and the things that they're asking for.
And so from a physical perspective, in order to kind of facilitate that sense of reciprocal, like relational learning, we both structure our class in a circular way. So gone are the days of desks in rows. Neither of us have taught it. I mean, and it's, every teacher can do what they want, but for us, like, I just find it works much more, it lends itself much more to just our approach as teachers and to this coursework. So we arrange the desks in a circular way, and it just creates a much more sort of open forum for sharing knowledge, building on that community, and sharing perspectives in a sort of a very much safe way.
Right. Yeah, so we've mentioned a few times that there's joys and there's challenges. So we're going to speak to that a little bit. Oh, we need the next slide, please. Thank you. So we find collaboration is key, and that is collaboration, really fostering a sense of collaboration in the classroom amongst and between the students. Collaboration is key amongst teachers, but also with bringing in the role of other folks, other teachers, you know, broadening the concept of teacher, bringing in guest speakers and elders and drum teachers and and the land as a teacher. So really collaboration is really important.
And as has been mentioned already, the district supports community of practice, pulling together. The drum steward program that Georgina is also shouldering has been really helpful for teachers, just to have that release time to reflect and share experiences, and it kind of minimizes a sense of isolation as we move into this work. So I'm really grateful for that, and I can't speak enough to how much it's meaningful to have colleagues from around the district to kind of share our learning. Yeah.
So just quickly, parent responses, we have found that pretty much, pretty consistently, it's a pretty positive response that these courses are now a grad requirement. We do find there's a lot of questions. So parent-teacher interviews or meet the teacher night, there's a keenness. People are curious.
From the students' perspective, I think we both agree that students have been like welcoming the coursework with open arms. There's engagement, enthusiasm, curiosity, respect, and a real willingness to sort of shift their traditional way of learning. And so it's been really exciting, and the kids are they're ready for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a big ask. Like we're asking them to face some pretty difficult content and to do work in a way that is perhaps quite unfamiliar to them. And it is really about finding a balance where we want to really invite these different types of experiences into the classroom. What we find at the high school level is it can be quite challenging dealing with sort of the system. So what that might look like a challenge might be something like you're having a circle and then there's announcements in the middle of it, or you want to organize a land-based learning experience, but you have a very strict timetable and you've got to get the kids back into the building. Things like it's a lot of it has to do with time. And, you know, things like it might sound different. There's times where you want to have drumming happening, but the classroom next door might be hosting a test of some sort. I haven't had the chance to have any smudging happen in my classroom yet, but I anticipate that that might be something I'll have to kind of, again, find a balance and work respectfully within the system. But it is, let's just say it's not without its challenges to try to do some of what we're being, we're really embracing as Indigenous pedagogy and approach and a different way of knowing and being. But again, you can't really get away from the fact that we are working in a colonial institution that has a bell schedule and grades. And so it's finding a balance.
For sure. So changes, I just was thinking about how this course how it looks now as opposed to even a few years ago. I had a little conversation with Frank Conaber, and he said, you know, when this first started, it was primarily geared towards Indigenous students. And even in the last few years, I mean, I taught the course at Esquimalt, and a large portion of my class were local Esquimalt and Songhees students. And now, as this is a grad required course, and particularly with our grade 12s right now, there's a massive amount of diversity in the classroom. And so that also means the sort of levels of understanding of just Canada's, you know, history, colonial history, and understanding of local nations. It's really diverse. And so it's just a shift. So it's interesting to kind of see how that's playing out.
Yeah, and that kind of links with this idea around, in particular, Indigenous student engagement. We've described this as a bit of a lingering question for us. And I'm just going to speak really frankly to this, is we're both settler teachers, and there's a complexity when you are a settler delivering Indigenous content and embracing a pedagogy that, like we've described, may not be what we were raised with, and to deliver that to Indigenous students. Very understandably, there's some question there from Indigenous students, and it does bring us back to those principles of learning. What we really find is that it takes a lot of time. You can't expect trust to happen like this. And relationship is really key. And so we're, you know, that's a little bit of this lingering question. We are not comfortable saying, yeah, we know better than you, if that makes any sense there. So yeah, we're trying to find ways to make it meaningful for Indigenous students. And I think we're doing it, we're navigating that, but it just looks different. You don't sit down after a 3-week unit and give a multiple choice test. It's just going to look different.
Yeah. And so one aspect that I keep coming back to in how to kind of build on that sense of safety and community and student engagement is by making connections with local nations. And so I'm really wanting to keep bridging that gap as much as possible by reaching out to family members. And I would really like to start trying to build on bringing, or maybe just having an elders tea or something, like to be able to invite members of community to come and share with their students and see how it's going in the classroom. because I do see how those relationships are really integral to many of our Indigenous students, and yet there's still this sort of like I guess just maybe a hesitancy, or it's just, I don't know, it's going to take time. And so I'm just really mindful of wanting to make those connections. And I do think that that's an important step, is to invite members of community into the school in whatever way we can. So it's just a little mental note that I'm working on.
Yeah. That would be if you asked us, like, what could we, if there was one thing we really wanted, it would be to find ways to make that relationship maybe more accessible, or something that we can do in a good way. So I spoke already to some of the challenges of kind of bringing in these different types of experiences into our classrooms, but we do want to say that maybe you can go to the next slide for us. We do want to say that these are the types of experiences that overwhelmingly students respond to. Students of like every ethnicity really overwhelmingly respond to this. So we each have some practices that we do in order to get student response, so that we can continue to be responsive in our teaching. And it was important to us, if we had time, to bring some student voice into this presentation. For me, one of the things I do is I use the learning logs that come from the English First Peoples teacher guide. And I kind of just throw these at my students whenever we've had a different type of learning experience. And it really prompts them to think and write reflectively. The one that I'd really like to just draw attention to is this first one. Student who had said the thing about circle in a classroom is that you're not actually choosing who is in that circle. Is this approach to circle authentic to Indigenous practices? I think it's just a great example of the types of questions students are asking.
And so for myself, at the end of the course, I've put together a survey. It's kind of a working survey, and it can be approached either like as a Google survey, or orally, or on paper. And so I just pulled one of the questions from that survey that I've offered. And so sort of at the end of the survey, and I asked the kids, what was the most enjoyable activity or experience from the course or throughout the semester that you will remember? And I pulled 3 responses. This came up time and time again. And what I'm hearing from my students is that they love having time for circle and sharing. It's been so powerful and such a wonderful way to learn together. They really like learning about traditional oral storytelling, trickster stories, and then we moved into creation stories. Just the student says those are the stories I'll remember. It's been really beautiful to watch. And then I also host or sort of facilitate what's called a Free Choice Friday. So it's student-centered, and the students throughout the semester, a student will have the opportunity to kind of lead us for that day. And one of the choices they can make is to take us outside. And I'd say 90% of the time on Free Choice Fridays, the kids will take us outside, and they lead the way and I follow them. And we usually go to a park, and they sit in nature, and then they come back and reflect on it in just a short writing piece. And they just love it. That connection to land, it's been huge.
Yeah, so that's us.
That's what we're doing.
We love talking about this, and are very open to questions and any other opportunities, really, where this is really gives us a big sense of purpose in our careers. So again, we're just really grateful to be invited.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Holly and Georgina, for sharing your stories and for your honesty as well. I think everyone just learned a whole lot from you and your experiences. So lastly, just where are we and where are we headed? So we are definitely in the beginning stages. This is the first year of full implementation across our schools, and we're feeling positive about the work being done, but we know that we still have a lot of work to do. We would like to create opportunities for continued support of teachers through collaboration and through resource sharing, and know that both individualized and collaborative support is important. Next, we need to learn what is needed on an individualized basis and try to meet those needs if we can. And we also have teacher leaders in our schools, such as Holly and Georgina, and they can model the way and they can provide supports to their colleagues as well. And again, local Indigenous community perspective is crucial in this work. We must continue to work to create these links between the curriculum and community, done with reciprocity in mind. It will be important to work at these connections between community and the classroom to ensure that community voice and engagement is present in a relational way. So we thank you so much for listening to our presentation this evening. We've been excited to share and provide an update on the implementation of the Indigenous Focus grad requirement, and we are happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the update. Yeah, let's open up the floor for a moment for any questions that anyone may have. Go ahead, Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Bobby. First, I just want to say thank you all for all your different perspectives and your expertise and your passion and your commitment to your both your role, I guess, as leaders, because you're definitely leaders, and that's come across very clearly tonight as you've explained your work and the great care and passion you have for your work. So thank you for that role as leaders, but also, I mean, this is such an important transition that we're making as a system. And leadership is important, but collaboration is so important. And we're seeing that even at the board level, that collaboration, that willingness to have those difficult conversations and to be open to different ways of doing things. So thank you for what you're doing in the classroom and at the district level to collaborate together to move us in that positive direction. And I just wondered if you could maybe provide a little bit more context and just about assessment. So, and how you've adapted your assessments in the context of this new approach to learning.
Well, I think assessment in itself is a tricky one for many teachers across the board, and regardless of the course. And for the English First Peoples course, the one thing that I think is really lends itself very well to the course is that it's a lot of it is based around oral sharing. And so I find that through the storytelling, through the discussion, through the opportunities to have an oral component in the classroom, helps for assessment because we have that sort of conversation piece going. So I will often use those opportunities as a way to just gauge a student's level of participation, success, and how they build on those skills. Even just when you consider like a sharing circle, you might have a student at the beginning of the semester who won't say anything, and they might just sort of begin with their name or maybe acknowledging their family. And then throughout the semester, they might respond to some of the questions that are being brought up. Mm-hmm. And then towards the end of the course, you may have them fully participating in maybe even bringing a question to the circle. So I use that lens for assessment. Yeah, I think off the top of my head, that's something I could speak to tonight.
And for me, like I do the same. It is a real question right now. Things are kind of in flux with the new reporting guidelines. So we've got a steep learning curve kind of in both areas. And it is really a critical question for us is how do these align and how can we do that in a way that is authentic and meaningful. A commitment that I have is to try to use the finesse guide as much as I possibly can. There are times that we have to be flexible with that, but it has some really great rubrics. And one of them is a group participation rubric. And it's one that I like to use over time because it echoes what Holly was saying. Sometimes you have a student who barely will share at the beginning of the course, and then you see, I just last week had a student bring some some of their Indigenous language into the course for the first time. So it is ways, it goes back to what I was saying about having to be open to experience. Sometimes you have to be not on alert, but you have to be open to other ways of seeing, what is a success.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd also take a little bit of a response to that for you, Nicole Duncan. One of the conversations that we've been having frequently over the last several years is what does culturally responsive assessment practices look like and feel like? And really gauging that conversation with community too, to be able to support classroom teachers and school communities, right? So then that way we can start to bridge some of that understanding together. And I think when we're looking at resources, we're not looking at resources in isolation. We're bringing community in, we're examining the resources with community, and then often asking, what does a culturally responsive assessment support look like as we're supporting teachers through this curiosity of transforming the way that we look at pedagogical approaches to education, not only for these specific courses, but I think we're going to start to see that in every area of our school district, especially with the new reporting and all of that. So I think it's a beautiful question that you've asked. I want to thank our teachers for being able to respond in the way that they did.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your responses and also for your question, Trustee Duncan. Next up, I see Nissa Tamel's hand. Go ahead.
Hello, thank you for the recognition. I have one thing to share and then a question from the BC PAC. I wanted to say that I was born and nourished by the lands of the unceded territories of the Ho'oponopono and Wasanich First Nations, who are just to the north of here. And I recall in grade 4 for me, so I think we're like 1989 here, my grade 4 teacher shared stories about Grandmother Mouse, who is a guide and a trickster in a lot of Coast Salish stories. And I remember that having a big impact on me in the classroom at that young age. And it is something that those stories I have carried with me into adulthood. I just always have an image in my head of her nimble fingers, always reaching for mountain goat wool. Apparently you could trade that for some guidance. Anyways, I was never visited by Grandmother Mouse, so I, luckily didn't have to give up my mountain goat wool. But I just wanted to share that can have a huge impact for students, no matter what the age is, and you never know what's going to resonate. So that's something I've carried with me. The question that came up from the BC PAC in response to this agenda item was wondering about if the change in the School Act regarding the education agreements had any impact on the district agreements that are already in place with the 4 houses, or is this initiative moving forward ahead of that or in step? Just some questions more on like that alignment from the provincial level to the district level.
I'm going to look at Superintendent Whitton. And I want to share that. Do you want me to take a run at that one first? What would you like?
Thank you, Shelley. I would be happy for you to start. And if I have any other additions, I'm happy to jump in.
Sure, sounds great. So I want to thank VC PAC for the question, and I'm really, I have a lot of gratitude also for the fact that you're examining Bill 40 and the changes to what that looks like for us in relation to Indigenous education. So there's 3 significant changes that are coming through with what that looks like for Indigenous education across all school districts and the way that we're activating and moving. Will it impact the relationship between the newly, where we're currently at with these courses? At this current time, I do not believe that it will. I believe that everything that we do right now through the 4 houses is Indigenous informed, and we meet regularly with them. I do think that what we're going to see in the coming months and weeks is we're going to see the shift to what used to be called, it has many iterations over the years, over 40 years in this district. So this district has a long-standing Indigenous Education Advisory Table over years, and we're going to see the 4 houses come together through that co-creation of the Indigenous Education Advisory Council, which then will inform us in our practice in all things that are related to Indigenous education. But right now we're looking at the terms of reference and waiting for that to come forward, and then we'll meet with the 4 houses on their best approach next steps forward. With another change that that has come is really working through our local education agreements, but we do have 2 local education agreements with both of the traditional territories for which we're on, so that's not going to impact a change for us in the district because we have those already in existence, and we're working with both Songhees and Esquimalt Nation frequently on any of those changes that need to be amended within those LEAs. And so I think that we're going to see a shift, but we're going to see a shift that's going to expand the way that we're in relationship through activating not only the 4 agreements and the work at hand, but how we're engaging in dialogue becoming, when it's related to Indigenous education matters at hand for our school district. And so that can be many different areas. And so it'll be nice to see VC PAC involved in some of those questions and considerations and what that relationship looks like and continues to grow. But I thought it was an excellent question.
Thank you. Thank you for your time answering it.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for the great question and also for the answers. And I see one last hand from Lena Palermo.
Hello, I just wanted to, first of all, thank you for such a great presentation. I was fortunate to be able to be part of the Pulling Together and Community of Practice sessions, and they've been so valuable. It's been so wonderful to see these passionate, dedicated teachers come together and work so hard to just do this work in a good way. And of course, we've been led by some wonderful leaders, and Emma and Colette and Lindsay supporting, and Frank. And I'm really, really glad that we advocated for those sessions to be during the day. Those teachers were able to actually come in and focus on the work that we were doing instead of doing it off the side of their desk or after school. So thank you. And it's so nice to see the confidence that's been built in all of those educators around both of those tables. I'm looking forward to seeing what the next group of the Pulling It Together, which will, I think, incorporate some of now the semester 2 and possibly some new teachers who will be teaching that, and maybe some carryover as well. I think that also the mentorship or leadership between groups who have experience is really, really great. But thanks so much for the wonderful work.
Thanks so much, Lena. All right. So seeing no more hands, I'm going to move us along to C2 in the agenda, literacy update. So I'm going to pass it over to District Principal Hovis.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Good. Thank you, Harold. And I'm gonna share my screen with you. I think, Andy, I just need to be able to access. I'm still disabled, I think.
That's sharing it.
Thanks, Andy. All right, just gonna give me 1 second. Okay, can everyone hear me again? We're good? Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you this evening. We are here to talk a little bit about our K-5 literacy plan. And in our office at the boardroom, I'm happy to have a group of folks here to share with you this evening. I've got Principal Tim McCreesh from South Park Elementary. I've got Christy Kovalevsky from South Park. I've got Eva Henrich from South Park. I've got early literacy collaboration teacher Rachel Ottenbright, and I've got district literacy learning support teacher Brianne Glover, who are all here in my office. So within all district departments, we continue to keep this goal central to our work. District departments share focus on priority students continues to align with aspects of the ministry's vision for student success and a guiding principle of student-centered learning. Again, we see literacy learning reflected in Goal 1 and 2 of the district strategic plan. And the goals and strategies of the strategic plan and enhancing student learning report are core to the work that supports all learners. Working in early literacy, our attention is with the end in mind as we reflect on the provincial definition for literacy. When we think of a grade 12 student exiting our system, this is an individual who has the ability to make meaning, critically analyze, and communicate and express in a variety of different ways. On our literacy journey, we have recognized the importance of continuing to support priority schools, recognized the importance of supporting all 28 schools in ways that meet their individual needs, recognize that elementary school budgets are limited, and recognize that district supports are also limited, and how can we be creative with what we have. When establishing a district literacy plan, our objective was to first focus funding on priority schools, reaching as many learners as possible and build on the strengths of skilled educators to respond to the diversity of learners in classrooms. Historically, we found evidence that the board has funded literacy in schools at least since the 1997-1998 school year. Prior to current literacy funding, this support was offered via a program called Reading Recovery. Reading Recovery is a short-term intervention that provides one-to-one tutoring to first grade students who are struggling in reading and writing. In 2018-19 school year, our district was sharing the cost with 14 schools who are implementing the Reading Recovery program. Of these 14 schools, 6 were considered priority schools. A total of 90 grade 1 students and 22 grade 2 students were supported within Reading Recovery in the 2018-19 school year. At the time, the cost of the Reading Recovery program was $485,000. If we considered funding Reading Recovery in all our elementary schools, the district cost alone would be over $1.2 million, and that was in 2018. Through feedback from schools and in discussions with the former board, the Reading Recovery program gradually came to an end in SD61 in the 22-23 school year. As well, I would like to also note the program also ended in our neighboring districts, which are SD62 and SD63. Although daily intervention is beneficial, it is a costly program. And also it wasn't equitable in its implementation and can only be offered to a select few learners each year. In 2021 school year, a new literacy plan was developed with a decision by the board to maintain Reading Recovery in 2 schools for 1 more year, and those schools were Tillicum and Craigflower. The focus of a district literacy plan included the implementation of an early literacy collaboration teacher in priority schools, as well as providing ongoing professional development district-wide. The plan was designed with strategic intention when we look at what research tells us about the most influential factors that contribute to the successful student achievement. The total cost for the program in 21-22 was $613,000. In 2022-23 school year, rather, with the end of reading recovery, the total literacy budget allocation was $576,000. Early literacy collaboration teachers were now supporting 10 priority schools, which included Tillicum and Craigflower. Over the past couple of years, as a school system, we have experienced some significant changes and shift in practice, all the while collectively facing a global pandemic. Moving literacy forward is not as simple as adapting a particular program or focusing on one subject area of support. As we continue to discover these past couple of years, literacy learning is complex and is truly specific to the individual needs of each learner. As we approach the district literacy plan, we recognize that one model doesn't fit all schools, nor would it be equitable or take into consideration the culture and identity of learners. When early literacy collaboration teachers meet as a team each week, we share practice, discuss our own perspectives, examine data, and determine next steps. This is hard work. There are varying opinions when it comes to literacy learning, and we continue to work throughout these differences to find ways to bring all best ideas together. We recognize that as a board, you want to and need to know if this investment in a very tight budgetary year is making a difference. However, what we've discovered is it's difficult to collect a common data set from an entire district to provide this evidence that is teacher supported and fair and equitable to all learners. It has taken us 2 years to create a common literacy assessment tool, and Brianne Glover will share more about it later in this presentation. Where we haven't had until recently a common assessment tool, we rely on data stories from each of our schools to truly gain an understanding of how and if what we are doing is making a difference to improve literacy learning for young learners. And what we do know is positive. Some of you have heard Craigflower Elementary School's successful literacy journey, where we've placed the greatest amount of funding. In a few moments, you'll hear from another one of our priority schools, South Park Elementary. Provincial assessments such as the FSA provide satellite data on how learners are doing at certain points in their educational journey. This snapshot occurs over the course of a couple days in grade 4. It is by no means provides a clear picture of early literacy learning in SD61. The data we look at includes the ongoing daily interactions that teachers have with students, purposeful instruction, and ongoing assessment. At its foundation, our literacy plan is focused on what research tells us is best practice to move learning forward. In SD61, this is what we are doing: teachers supporting teachers and students in classrooms. Collective teacher efficacy is the level of confidence that teachers have in their ability to guide students to success. This involves helping students learn, building effective programs for students, and effectively changing student learning. So what is the role of early literacy collaboration teachers? It is focused on priority schools as part of a school-based team. It involves ongoing co-teaching, co-assessing, and co-planning. It's responsive to students' learning needs. It's moving literacy learning forward for all learners. It's embedded in collaboration and Pro-D in schools. And it's weekly team meetings, examining what is working, what are the challenges, and what are our next steps. If you were to drop into a priority school, what would literacy support look like from an early literacy collaboration teacher? It begins by identifying school needs as they meet with school-based teams. And for those that don't know, school-based teams are essentially a committee including the principal and learning support staff who meet regularly to identify students' needs and make actionable plans of support. Alongside the ELCT, school-based teams identify classrooms that require additional literacy support. The ELCT then meets with classroom teachers to co-plan, co-teach, and assess on a bi-weekly basis for several weeks or months. These supports are highly individualized based on the recommendations of the classroom teacher and the needs of students in the classroom. Following a period of time in a class, the ELCT will then go back to the school-based team and review and reflect on how a particular classroom is doing based on classroom observations, data, and evidence. An ELCT will then move to the next recommended classroom, or depending on circumstance, remain in the current classroom for an extended period of time. So the evolution of the literacy plan has brought us to the 23-24 school year. The majority of funding supports priority schools with the role of the early literacy collaboration teacher. In addition, these teachers have some funding to support ongoing collaboration in each school. Our 10 priority schools include Craigflower, Oaklands, Tillicum, Vic West, Macaulay, George J, Quadra, Cloverdale, James Bay, and South Park. Again, as we look to stretch our budget, how could remaining funds support the other 18 schools? In ongoing reflection, we determined that Friday mornings weren't always being effectively utilized in priority schools. We made the decision to create specifically literacy inquiry focus in other schools that they could access with the support of an early literacy collaboration teacher. As well, we revised and adapted our elementary district learning support teacher role to refocus our attention in literacy learning in schools. Through a menu of options, these 18 school staffs determined what supports would best meet the needs in their schools. 7 schools chose to have our district literacy learning support teacher work alongside them this year. 4 schools requested the support of our early literacy collaboration teacher on Fridays. And 7 schools noted that their staff simply needed time to collaborate and work together on a common focus. This spring, these schools will be coming together to share their learning with each other. And as you note also, we've got 9 schools who've also accessed French immersion literacy grants. I'm now going to introduce Principal Tim McCreesh, and he's going to share the journey at South Park Elementary School. Tim.
Thanks, David. Hi, everybody. I'm Tim McCreesh, the principal at South Park. I get the pleasure of introducing the wonderful teachers down at South Park. But just before I do that, just a little background into South Park. As I'm sure you're all aware, we're transitioning from a school of choice to a catchment school, which has had a significant impact on the demographics and the students that we're seeing. So we're growing. We've gone up a division this year. We've gone from 175 students. I think we're close to 180. I think we're at 187 as of today. But where we've noticed a really significant change is in the number of ELL students. So when I arrived there 2 years ago, we had 7 ELL students, and this year we are now at 67. So a significant percentage of our population is ELL, which is fantastic, but clearly has an impact on literacy instruction and teaching. So it's been a change for the teachers down at South Park. We've also had some changing staff over the last couple of years due to retirement and leaves and vacancies. We've had a changing staff, and so this year things are stable there, which has been really great. And one of the things that we've noticed when we look back over the last few years, even though we've had this changing staff, we've still been able to sustain growth in literacy. And I think one of the big parts of that is having Rachel there as a consistent staff member. And so I'm going to hand it over to Rachel and our teachers right now. So Eva.
Thank you, Tim. Hi, everyone. I'm Eva Henrich. I've worked at South Park this is my 6th year now. I teach grade 1-2, and I have had the pleasure of working with Rachel Ottenbright, our early literacy collaboration teacher, for the last 2.5 years.
My name is Christy, and Eva, and I've worked at South Park since 2019. And Eva and I co-taught and have worked with Rachel, 3 years.
So we're here to speak to how the early literacy collaboration teacher role has shifted our practice and affected our students. Let's just change our slide. So the ELCT role has shifted practice by fostering a collaborative school culture. Push-in literacy support allows for collaboration and provides feedback that empowers teachers to implement and adjust literacy practices in real time. This ensures personalized and effective learning experiences for each student. Side-by-side teaching provides the opportunity to design learner-specific programming as each group of learners is diverse and unique. The ELCT role has provided collaborative and opportunities and helped teachers to develop common routines and practices across classes. This consistency has helped solidify a more unified approach among grade groupings, as well as year over year. This role has also helped with facilitating feedback and collaboration amongst teachers, sparking a transformation in teaching methods and fostering growth for both educators and students. Multiple teachers in the classroom makes ongoing informal and formal assessments possible in order to identify and address challenges promptly, fostering a proactive and supportive learning environment.
So how does this look for teachers and our practice? Literacy at South Park has transformed over the past 3 years. What started as teachers being released to go watch colleagues teach progressed when we realized our need for consistent built-in collaboration time. So for the last 2 years, we've been creative in using our ELCT along with our admin and the teacher librarian to build regular collaboration times into the schedule. In this time, we learned that feedback from colleagues led to collective growth through the sharing of resources and practices. Initially, collaboration time was an opportunity to share out what was working, and later it grew into meaningful inquiry for pedagogical growth. We learned that consistent routines and team year over year allowed for students and teachers to feel more confident, and more importantly, allowed for learning to accelerate sooner because everyone was aware of common classroom routines, practices, and tools. We found that consistent relationship between teachers and between students supports growth over time, and it allows for diving deeper into literacy practices and learning. When teachers are consistent, learner stress decreases and engagement increases.
So what have we noticed in our students? We see an increase in student engagement, confidence, risk-taking, growth mindset, and intentional reflection, all of which leads to increased independence. Students are familiar with routines, allowing them to build confidence and show up ready to learn. When students are familiar with and confident in routines, they are able to focus on deeper learning and engagement. Consistency over time helps create a culture of courageous reading and writing. Increased confidence fosters increased risk-taking, which builds independence in our students.
Okay, I'm really excited to show you this slide. This is an example of growth from a vulnerable learner from our school. This is a journal from a student in grade 3. To paint the picture, the September journal on the left that you see wasn't actually their first journal entry. The first one was actually a page ripped in half. This student was consistently disengaged in literacy and spent much of their time avoiding participating. They were reluctant to engage with literacy routines and were often dysregulated. They began their grade 3 journey as a reluctant writer because it was a challenge for them to build words. With support and when regulated and calm, they were able to be ready with a good idea, and they loved to share their stories orally. Through consistent literacy routines, expectations, and staff year over year, this student gained confidence in their ability and developed the skills to engage with literacy. The student's growth was made possible through differentiated support within the classroom routines and by tailoring the program to meet their individual needs and the needs in the classroom.
Thank you. We're going to hand it over to Rachel Ottenbright.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Ottenbright, and I am one of the early literacy collaboration teachers. I have been a part of this team since we started 3 years ago, and this is my 3rd year working with the South Park team. I just wanted to share a little bit of data, and this graph is just following one of the cohorts that started in grade 1 the first year our ELCT role started at South Park. So writing has been a large part of our literacy focus. And we tracked this data from the cohort that was in grade 1, the first year of having an ELCT. So our grade 3s now this year. The graph follows the writing trends through that first and second year, and we will continue to track it through this third year as well. The blue line shows the students that are extending or proficient on our proficiency scale. And you'll notice that it goes from 57% in term 1 of the first year to now 65% in term 3 of year 2. And then you'll notice the red line is our students that were developing or emerging, and you will see that decrease from 43% to 35%. So what our data is showing us is that there is an increase of 8% of students moving into that proficient or extending range over those first 2 years of this collaborative literacy work at South Park. Finally, one of the big factors that we want to look at is how students view themselves as readers and writers. When we're looking at the holistic view of our students, their voices matter. This is an investment in their future successes, and so we want to know how they feel about themselves. This year, we're spending a lot of time gathering student data and student input, using this as a guide to how we engage students and how we teach. In the self-reflection taken from the cohort from the previous slide, we found that 85% of these students felt either positive or neutral about writing. Even many of those students that find writing difficult still said that they enjoyed writing, and that to us is one of our biggest successes. We want these students to feel confident in their reading and writing so that they are more engaged and more independent. We look forward to sharing with you in the future that the impact student voice has had on their learning successes as we continue to do this work and to gather this information. And then I just wanted to share this example that is on the screen from one of our now grade 3 students, because to me, it just was so insightful in them knowing themselves as a reader and them understanding that it's okay to get stuck because the adults around them will help. Thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Brianne Glover to continue talking about our ELCT team.
Hello, everybody. I'm Brianne Glover, and I am our district literacy learning support teacher. Thank you to the South Park team for being here, and thank you for sharing your story. I appreciated Tim's overview of the change in demographics and finishing with Rachel's data. So thank you so much for sharing. You've highlighted some of the prime examples of what is happening in schools this year, and I will come back to the ELTC work in just a moment. But first, I want to share some of the work that has happened in our team in developing common literacy assessment tools, kindergarten to grade 5. So together as a team, we have developed reading and writing proficiency scales as a way to align literacy data. They were created in response to the ministry literacy aspects that came out last spring, as well as in response to the voices of our colleagues, specifically at the early years, expressing a desire for support around the foundational skills of reading and writing that greatly contribute to a student's literacy development. They are designed to complement the greater scales, the greater literacy scale aspects, and also support the finite steps of every child's literacy path. So I'm excited to share this with you. Up here on the screen, you'll see an example of what these scales look like. And this is a grade 3 writing scale, or a part of it, so you could see it. As a team, this has been incredible learning and growth that we can now share with those who we are working with. We have done our best to be responsive to the system changes that David talked about earlier, supportive to our colleagues, and equitable and inclusive to all of our learners. It was important to design these with strength-based learning language that can be used as an ongoing communication tool with students and with parents around growth, development, and next steps. And most importantly, these scales are fluid and benefit the learners by helping guide each individual learning journey. Every learner will find a place on these continuums that represent where they are at currently and where they are going next. Both the reading and the writing scales accurately align with the BC curriculum and the new assessment and reporting language. They are teacher-driven and are an assessment resource created in-house. They allow for flexibility of the diverse learners in classrooms and the varying teaching practices amongst colleagues. As a team going forward, we plan to use these scales as a way to collect common data in all classrooms that we work in. We will use the collected fall and June data to show concrete evidence of learning each year. However, classroom teachers will likely use these scales more often to closely monitor student progress, communicate student learning, and inform next steps. I'd like to now bring us back to the work of an ELCT. As we are now into year 3 of this literacy support plan, this embedded and ongoing collaboration is proving to foster a team approach and a literacy culture at the priority schools where staff are encouraged to and are now initiating the shared responsibility of student learning and growth. Thinking back to the reading recovery data that David shared, what stands out most is the number of students that are benefiting from literacy supports. The total of 112 students that were supported in the 2018-2019 school year through reading recovery. This year, with a fairly comparable literacy fund, the ELCTs are able to reach nearly 1,000 students coming out of just term 1, and with a projected significant increase going well beyond 1,200 students by the end of the year, for this year only. This is a huge difference from the reading recovery model that we were supporting previously. Much of the data that we have collected over the last 2 years is not completely comparable because of the shifts in assessment, language, and pedagogies, making it challenging to draw generalizations. We do, however, have some snapshots of comparable data that has been collected to share with you today. We also have a concrete data plan of using the proficiency scales moving forward, which has already begun this year. We gathered reading data from Tillicum and Cloverdale last year and compiled it for you this evening. The graph here shows the growth in reading proficiency in grade 1 and 2 classrooms. The first 2 bars on the left of the graph look at a sample of 6 grade 1 classes, totaling 88 students, who were supported by a classroom teacher and an ELCT in the area of reading from September to June. At the beginning of the year, 69% of these grade 1 students were reading at a proficient level or higher. And by the end of the year in June, 78% were reading proficiently or higher. These grade 1 students made a near 10% increase in reading proficiency. The next 2 bars on the right show an even bigger increase. A sample of 5 grade 2 classes, totaling 83 students, who were also supported in reading by a classroom teacher and an ELCT, for the entirety of the year, September to June, increased by 35%. At the beginning of the year, only 45% of these grade 2 students were reading at a proficient level. That is less than half of this cohort reading where they should be. By the end of the year, 80% of these students were reading at a proficient reading level or higher. I will note that the grade 2 cohort district-wide has been noted to have been the most academically affected since returning from the pandemic. The blue graph here in the middle looks at the average of 9 kindergarten classes that were supported in reading by a classroom teacher and an ELCT teacher for only the last 12 weeks of school last year, so April till June. The light blue section at the bottom indicates the expected end-of-year reading or pre-reading skills for a kindergarten student. The darker blue color above shows at the end of kindergarten last year where the average was for these 138 students. And that was a mid-grade 1 level. So that means on average, these students were able to begin this year in grade 1 at least 1 full term ahead of where is expected in reading. There is absolutely still room for growth in all of these samples that I've shown you tonight, and we continue to look ahead with this in mind. But the increase in student achievement that you've just heard was made possible with the collaborative and direct classroom supports that have been dedicated to these very vulnerable early years. Similar results have been found in many of our other priority schools and classrooms with ELCT support, both in the areas of reading and in writing. We can't do a wholesome job as educators that aligns with the strategic plan and the First People's principles of learning by just looking at student skills and academic performances. Part of this holistic and reflective work involves considering the learners. Their experiences in this education system will ultimately be what shapes the lasting learning. Part of our literacy data plan and what ELCTs are bringing into practice is the ongoing importance of student voice and relational reflection. We heard earlier about the power of the practice of circle from Emma, I believe. And we just wanted to share that self-reflection is a way to ensure that learners are included. The blob tree here that you see on the screen is a student self-reflection tool that was mentioned earlier or shown earlier by the South Park team. Understanding that not all assessments are created equally, this assessment takes into account the perspective of the learner, which we as educators are using to guide and shape the delivery of our instruction. Considering the question, how do learners feel about themselves as readers and writers, helps to ensure that what is happening in the classrooms is actually meaningful to the learners, the most important people in this whole system. Based on student responses, like the ones you can read on the screen, ELCTs and classroom teachers have been able to shift their instruction and delivery modes to foster more enjoyment, more engagement, and more connection to learning. This one particular ELCT and classroom teacher team used the input from student voices to shift their approach to teaching writing in the classroom. The targeted instruction of phonics knowledge remained the focus goal for term 1. However, the approach and application was what shifted. These students are now showing a deeper sense of belonging, engagement, ownership over their own learning, and an overall joy of learning that was not evident before. These, along with the story that you heard from South Park tonight, are some of the trends that are happening across all 10 priority schools. They just look slightly different in each classroom and at each school. The early literacy collaboration teachers have worked closely with classroom teachers, learning support teachers, school bus teams, and most importantly, students. Together, they work to develop a sense of community. They create shared visions and goals. They focus on high student and teacher learning, and they create high expectations. The ELCT roles have played an integral part in developing more respectful and supported learning environments in our district. Similar to what Emma mentioned, collaboration is such a key part of this work, and that truly makes a difference for students. This built-in support at the school level allows for the ongoing dialogue and problem solving, and we are only beginning to see the effects of lasting change. Is it perfect? Absolutely not, but it's working. It's powerful and it's purposeful as we all strive to make more of a difference and enhance optimal learning and achievement for all students. Hopefully, we've been able to share some of the impact that the literacy funding has made on student learning and teaching practices. Although a majority of the literacy funding goes to the 10 priority schools, all 28 of our elementary schools are receiving and benefiting from literacy supports in some way, which hasn't been a reality in our district until this year. We recognize the importance of ensuring all learners, kindergarten through grade 5, are being supported through their own literacy journey. On behalf of David and myself and the ELCTs and the South Park team, we want to thank you for the continued funding that has been put forward for literacy over the last 20+ years. We also thank you for your time this evening to hear the ongoing story, literacy story in 61. We recognize that this is a lot of information to share in a very short time, and it's quite challenging to sum it all up in a concise way. I want to take a moment before we close just to invite you trustees to some of our collaboration sessions that you'll see on the screen here that we're planning with our priority schools and early literacy collaboration teachers to do some of this reflective work and intentional planning. Some of you may have heard the literacy story from Craig Flower last year, and South Park shared theirs tonight. This will give you a chance to hear from the other 8 priority schools. We hope you'll be able to join us to either listen in or be a part of the conversations that are happening around the tables. We will send formal invites to you soon, but please hold the dates and be welcome to come. Thank you again for your time tonight and the dedication to literacy in our district.
And that's it from us. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, David and Brianne and the whole South Park team. That was an amazing presentation. I would like to open up the floor for questions at this point, or comments, or if anyone has anything. Oh, go ahead, Trustee Duncan.
Thank you very much. Thank you to you all for being here and taking some time out of your evening to share the work that you've been doing over the last few years. We really appreciate all your dedication and your efforts. I had a couple of questions. I'm really heartened to hear the focus on, how we assess as a system how we're doing and whether our literacy approach is assisting learners. One of the things I certainly took away from what we've heard tonight is that that collaboration approach, that collaborative approach, which really requires adequate release time, is so key to delivering this kind of a literacy framework or approach. So I'm wondering if you could speak to release time, I guess, and that opportunity to provide collaborative time in the 10 priority schools. So is that where most of the funding is going, to support that release time and that collaboration? That's my first question.
Thank you, Trustee Duncan. To answer that question, so as you may recognize, that most of the funding that we receive for literacy goes into staffing. We have some remaining funds to invest in collaboration. So every ELCT and priority school receives about $4,000 in collaboration funds. And so those ELCTs are responsible for those collaboration funds, and they work with their school teams to provide release time to collaborate and work together. So every priority school receives about $4,000 in collaboration funds. And then our Friday schools, I want to say we receive about $2,500 for the Friday collaboration, so that teachers can also, ELCTs can also collaborate with schools on the Fridays. And then Brianne Glover and her schools that she's supporting also has some collaboration funds that provide some release for those teachers as well.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the clarity. Of course, staffing is always the number one cost. Okay, fair enough. Chair, do you want me just to pause, and just sort of so you can ask the rest of the group whether they have some more questions before I give you my next question?
Sure, let's take a moment. Does anyone else have any questions before Trustee Duncan continues? I see no hands. Go ahead, Trustee.
Okay, thanks. Just wanted to sort of delve in and get a better idea of some of the feedback or what you're hearing from the team meetings that you hold. So in terms of what's working, what are the challenges and sort of next steps. Yeah, if there's anything there that you could share with us to give us an idea of what you're finding.
Yeah, no, thank you again for the question. I think one of the big pieces, and I'll let Brianne jump in a minute, is there's been some real big discussions, both I would say nationally and internationally, around reading and best practices within reading. And so you may have heard there's been conversations around things like the science of reading or balanced reading. So for us as a team, I think really it's diving into research and evidence and looking at, how do we hear from all these voices, from colleagues, from teachers out there, and what can we bring in terms of the best practice from all of these areas and bring those together to I think have a balanced approach, if you will, to our literacy practices and instruction. I'm going to pass it over to Brianne maybe to add anything else that she'd like to, but that has been a big focus and big conversation around the table.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I will just follow up with that it has been over the last couple of years a challenge, but also a reward too, because it's forced extra learning, I think, on our end. And we've delved so deep into this learning. And so there's been a lot of professional learning and growth around our table. And our table doesn't necessarily consist of all people who are aligned on their pedagogy and practice. And so it's been just a phenomenal learning experience for us. And I think we're just a small sample of what is represented out in the district and beyond. So it's allowed us to kind of live it together and work through it together and then bring it out to our schools. One of the key pieces that has come from this challenging work and discussion are the proficiency skills. And so that is something that we have all been able to agree and land on. It's part of our curriculum. It's our collective responsibility is to ensure that learning is happening through this curriculum. And so that has been a place, no matter what assessment is being used in the classroom or what approach or practice is being used, our end goal for students is all the same. And so these documents that we've created, well, specifically the reading, but the reading and the writing is really to align and anchor us, and I mean us as a greater district team for the learner's benefit. So I don't know if that answers your question at all.
Go ahead, Trustee Duncan.
Just let me know if you want me to pause, because this is also, I mean, this work is just so very important. It's foundational to all learning. And so pardon me if I've got a lot of questions.
No,
yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I mean, I can see the passion that you bring to your work and the commitment to the subject matter. I sort of building on, my curiosity around sort of what's coming up in your team meetings. As I was listening to your presentation and then reviewing the slides before the meeting, one of the things that struck me was just around the role of school-based teams in identifying learners that need that extra support. Certainly the decision to go a different direction in terms of what we're funding, it was a difficult one, because my concern around the decision-making table at the time was, how do we ensure that, that relatively small group of students are getting that one-to-one support, so that they're not just being passed on to the next grade without the skills that they need in literacy in order to be successful. To ensure that by the time they get from elementary to middle, that they're well placed with, strong enough literacy skills to both stay in school and then feel confident and proud of their contributions in the classroom. So one of my concerns was that, how do we make sure that with this new literacy framework and the new approach to funding, that we maintain those one-to-one supports? And so I'm seeing from some of the data that you're collecting and have shared tonight that, you're seeing some increased achievement sort of at the top range of the new proficiency scale, maybe some declining achievement in the bottom two categories of the proficiency scale, if I'm reading the slide correctly. And so how does the current approach address those kids that are maybe in that 20%, right? Who aren't achieving as well, who aren't responding to the interventions? What do we provide them to help them really just improve and get that sense of confidence in their ability to read and write?
So I think I just want to kind of go back a little bit just around the reading recovery model, because I think there was some pieces to reading recovery, and I was a former principal in a school that offered reading recovery both in English and in French, and there were lots of great things that we saw within a reading recovery model, which included, I think, the piece where there was that ongoing professional development piece that teachers had. I think one of the challenges that I saw within reading recovery is sometimes you had these teachers that were getting some exceptional training, but that didn't always necessarily translate to what was going on in the classroom. And so you had these kids being pulled out of the classroom and giving intensive intervention and then going back into the classroom. And what was happening for that classroom teacher who had that student the majority of the time? Where was their level of ongoing professional development? And when we talk about that teacher efficacy, and when we talked about those slides previously, one of the pieces I think that shifted for us is it's not about taking kids out of the classroom so much as it's taking and putting those supports in the classroom and working alongside that classroom teacher. Because what we have is, instead of kids leaving and spending a little bit of time, and maybe that reading recovery teacher is in the school next year, maybe they've moved on to a different school, but you're building that teacher collective capacity, you're building teacher strengths in classrooms. And that's where it's needed, Trustee Duncan. We need to have those teachers and building that teacher capacity within classrooms. And so you've got those supports. Teachers are building upon the strengths that they already have in supporting those learners and recognizing that we're going to have a diversity and range of learners in every single classroom. We're going to have kids that are being successful in areas and having strengths in certain areas and having areas to be supported in. And so I think that ELCT working in the classroom provides that support alongside the classroom teacher. And then we also still have that role of learning support teachers that are in buildings. So when we go back to that school-based team model, it is working within that school-based team model context and recognizing and identifying those learners. But there's also a group of educators within every school that are supporting some students that might need those extra supports and extra resources, that being maybe a speech and language pathologist, maybe it's a school psychologist. So using some of those other resources within the context of the school as well.
Thank you so much, David. Superintendent, I see the whole team's hand. Go for it.
Yes, sorry. Just making sure you saw us. Just want to clarify, if you could, David, or someone in the room, around the data, because I think what I saw, but I just want to clarify, is that there are fewer students who are emerging and more students who've moved up to the category of proficient and developing, or I can't remember exactly, but what I did want to clarify is that there's not a decline in achievement. It's actually fewer in one category and more in another, in the right way.
That's right. Yeah. Do one of you want to speak?
No, that's correct. Yeah.
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay. Just
And
and if we can have Brianna add it
I just want to add that I think the role of the ELCT and the support coming into the classroom is actually targeting a lot of those, Trustee Duncan, those students who would typically maybe be pulled out or targeted for that reading. It's bringing the supports into the classroom as best we can with multiple adults in the room. And what we've noticed as a trend by kind of shifting that model is that it's actually reaching more than just the few students who would be pulled out for that support. These supports coming into the room are benefiting all learners, all 24 of them in the classroom. And the shift in even moving beyond proficiency to extending is outrageous. So we're seeing more kids at that extending proficient level and fewer at the emerging developing. And then, like David is saying, we continue to beef up the classrooms with support. And then if and when those few students left who are still struggling, that's why we're working with learning support teams, with school-based teams, like David said, the professionals around the table, the school psychologists, to really give more of that targeted specific support. But it really does. I hope that makes sense. It's reaching more students at the classroom level first, before we're targeting them as struggling. Yeah.
Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thanks. And no, that makes perfect sense. And thank you for clarifying the slide on page 40. I now, looking at it again, appreciate why we see a decline. It's not actually a decline, it's going in the right direction. So yeah, thanks so much. I also struggle with the proficiency scale still at times. The only other question I really wanted to ask you tonight, because we have the privilege of your presence, is just around, you mentioned ELL students, and we're seeing an increase, and in particular in the context of the South Park learning community. But I'm wondering sort of how our current literacy framework helps to support ELL learners.
You want to take that? Do you want me to take that? Go ahead. No. So again, I think when we look at ELL supports are another addition to the supports that are provided in school. We have district ratios, and when I'm looking at it in the beginning of the year and determining where we're seeing increases, I know that I often have many conversations with Tim. Tim and I've had conversations about where his current ELL numbers are. and that equals an increase in teacher staffing and supporting ELL. So ELL teachers are part of a school-based team. They are working with our ELCTs or working with our LSTs, and they're providing those supports in classrooms. So that would be additional supports that happen. And again, as they work together as teams and supports, that comes together as a group supporting those students. Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead, Tim.
Just in relation to that question, Trustee Duncan, and then to your previous question, I think when we have that Rachel going into those classrooms, what we're seeing is that it's really lifting up all of the kids. So all of the kids are getting lifted up. And then we've got those specialist teachers that are then able to go in and provide those additional supports that David's mentioning, like the ELL teacher will go in, our learning support teachers will go in, SLP will go in. And so it's really benefiting, because what's happening is our teachers are developing their skills, their confidence in teaching literacy. As a result of having having Rachel in the classroom, it lifts everybody up, and then those specialist teachers can go in and support to help those kids that we want to bring up to proficiency.
So I teach grade 1-2 at South Park, and my classroom of 19 has 11 ELL learners in it this year. And so the impact of having Rachel push into my room 2 days a week alongside the ELL schedule of push in support, sometimes pull out support, but in the case of my group, often push in support, just having those extra adults in the classroom, we get to provide that much more support to the whole group. And so just to echo what Tim and everyone is saying is, like, we are seeing everyone getting lifted up, but in the case of my particular classroom, that is a lot of ELL learners who are benefiting.
Thank you all, appreciate it.
I also just wanted to add that we're finding in our primaries, especially at South Park, the majority of our primary classes, sort of over 50% of them are English language learners. And with the targeted collaboration time that we're able to give, we can look at those classes as a whole and really focus in on the individual needs of all of those students and come up with plans that are going to benefit that whole class. So I think that collaboration time is also really, really key in us supporting all of those students, but also all of our ELL learners, because we can look at those specific targets at those individual students where they're at and where we're trying to get them to.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much to the South Park team for your answers. I see Nissa Tamel's hand. Go ahead.
Thank you. I want to thank the last speaker for defining ELL, because I wasn't sure. I quickly Googled it, but yes, English language learner. And I just want to say thank you very much for sharing the experience of this, because as a parent in the district, and I think I can speak for parents in general, that like Trustee Duncan acknowledged, there was some concern about shifting the focus in the programs, and it's really great to see you presenting the data and also the experiences of the students in the schools to support these additional supports that we're able to put in place for more students. So thank you very much. I was quite verklempt listening to the stories about the students and how they viewed their own success. So that's really exciting to see.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Seeing no more hands up, before we move on to the next section of our agenda, I'm just going to call for a 5-minute comfort break. So we will come back at 8:53. Let's make it 8:55 just for clarity's sake. Okay, everybody come back. Good timing. We'll just give everybody another couple of seconds here. Alrighty, let's jump right back in at agenda item C3. I'm going to pass it over to Secretary Treasurer for Policy Subcommittee.
Thank you, Chair. I've just included in the agenda package the most recent update from the Policy Subcommittee. We held a meeting on January 9th, reviewing the board motions over the past 3 meetings. And we didn't have enough time to cover both policies that were directed to the committee, but we were able to address policy 6163.1, learning resources. And we had received some feedback from the Ed policy meeting on December 4th, which was incorporated into the draft. And then the committee went through and made some additional amendments. The version with the final version with all of the amendments are included in the agenda package. And we're looking for the board to approve this revised policy if there are no further amendments.
Thank you so much, Secretary Treasurer. And with that, would someone like to move the recommended? Go ahead, Trustee Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. There was just a few other amendments that I think we need to work through, just some minor things like the inclusion of a full stop or an extra space or a little bit around numbering, and then a couple of things that just in terms of the wording. The policy committee worked really hard to make a lot of changes on the go in the one meeting, and so there's just a few things that I think we just need to address tonight.
Absolutely. Do we need to bring the motion to the floor first?
We can, because it's more informal. Well, it's up to you, Chair, but because it's more informal too, and our partners around the table have more than one opportunity to speak to it. If you like opening the floor to their feedback first, and then we can suggest some amendments, or I'm happy to move some amendments, however you'd like to work it, Chair.
That sounds great. Thank you so much. I think opening it up to the floor is the best. So I already see Mrs. Mel's hand, so I will let you have it.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the committee for already addressing some of the concerns that BCPAC has brought forward. This has been a point of discussion at our meetings over the last several months, and a couple more points surfaced. Just around, we're thinking about equity issues which are touched on in the policy, but particularly things around voice and visual representation, and looking at language around racism and ableism, like ensuring that the language in the policy addresses that, which there is some motion towards that, but I guess the review from our membership was potentially like if there's an opportunity to really go through the policy, seeing as you're opening it up to change anyway. And then one point that didn't seem to be addressed, and this is not something I'm familiar with, but the membership brought up, was digital literacy and safety. So including some materials around that, or reference policy around those areas, just because teachers have freedom to bring like course materials from multiple sources and into the classroom, but a lot of those are accessed online. It may be worthwhile to speak to digital literacy, and then I guess the last thing is sort of circling around to one of our first agenda items this evening is around the importance of student involvement and feedback. Does that belong in the policy? Is there, you know, it potentially, if a situation arose where some materials were being presented and students raised concerns about the appropriateness or that sort of thing, is there any place in the policy to speak to how that would be handled in order to ensure that materials were responsive to student needs and having that more student driven process? Anyways, I know that those are a number of thoughts, but trying to bring forward as many voices as I can.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that feedback, Nissa. I'm wondering if anyone else has any feedback that they would like to share before I can already tell that Trustee Duncan has some amendments to move. Okay, seeing none. Trustee Duncan, did you want to move those amendments first or okay?
Why don't we do that? And then because I think as we go through some of the amendments, which are maybe less minor, it'll pick up on some of the comments and the feedback that Nissa shared from her fellow members. So yeah, with your permission, Chair, perhaps we can just sort of start in paragraph 1, rationale. Okay, so we're just at page 55 of the pack up for folks that are following along. And just a very minor point around a full stop. So this is the first paragraph, last sentence. There's just, we forgot a full stop, just a period at the end there. And then at under policy at 3.2, the first full sentence, there's 2 sections of red changes. The second one that starts with our communities and society. I think we just forgot to delete the word appeal. So I think it should read our communities and society and the presentation of different points of view. So we restart out the changes with broad appeal that reflects the diversity of our communities and society and the presentation of different points of view. So I think that's what we were trying to achieve. Chair, did you want me to just sort of roll through the changes and then move them as a group? Or would you like me to pause there for some discussion? Or are we okay with so far where we're at?
I think so far where we're at, I can't imagine there would be discussion over a period or a word that we didn't even mean to put in there. So I think we can press.
Okay, I'll keep going. And then the next thing that I caught was just at later on at 3 points. Pardon me just a second while I scroll down there. So at 3.93, and this is on page 58 of the pack up. So between 3.93 and 3.94, there's just an extra space there. Again, just very minor. And then at 3.95, what we've done is we've added a second paragraph. I actually think that really needs to be numbered 3.96. I think that's sort of an important sort of point that we want to distinguish with separate numbering. And it speaks to really one of the things that Nissa raised around, you know, how, if there are concerns about learning resources, would we address those? So I'm suggesting first that the second paragraph under 3.95 would be a new paragraph number 3.96. And then if we look at the paragraph itself, suggesting a couple of changes to the paragraph. So right now, what it would do is that after the word principles, so it would read, concerns about the use of learning resources will be considered on the basis of complying with the principles. And I'm suggesting then we add the following, and evaluation criteria. And then it would continue, for selecting and using resources as presented in this policy, full stop. And then, sorry, just bear with me a second. no full stop. It would read through this policy, in this policy through a reconsideration procedure as outlined in regulation, so on and so forth. So it's just adding the words and evaluation criteria after the word principles.
Awesome. I think we should maybe pause here just for a moment.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. Is there any discussion or questions at this point? Okay, continue, Chair. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nissa.
I wasn't fast enough on my digital hand going up, so I used my analog one. So I do like that, like just the feedback on that 3.96, because I think that paragraph could address the student concerns piece. And I wasn't sure if there would be an opportunity for VCPAC in an email to provide some of the points that I covered in when I spoke, just to see if there compare some of the concerns that parents brought forward to some of the language, just to make sure that we're covering that off. Is that a possibility? Okay, I will make sure you get that email.
Go ahead, Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to that if I may, Chair. Yeah, I think the main thing is that whatever, like if the committee passes this tonight with some amendments, then the important thing would be to make sure that the board has any further feedback before the board meeting so that we can consider any further amendments at the board table if necessary. Okay, great. Yeah, so how do you want to proceed, Chair? Did you want me to continue? There's one more amendment and then just a suggestion, and then I'm done.
That sounds great. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is at 4.1. This is on page 59 of the packet. Okay, so the paragraph reads, the board delegates the responsibility for coordinating the selection and making recommendations for the purchase of learning resources to the district or school educational staff. And then there would be, sorry, bear with me a second. So then there would be the full stop. Okay, and then so the full stop would sorry, 1 second. My notes are not very good on this. Pardon me, just 1 second. Yeah, so full stop. And then there would be a new sentence which would read, the review of requests for reconsideration of the use of a learning resource, pardon me, will be undertaken in accordance with the process outlined in the associated regulation 6163.1. So I'll just go over that one more time. So the paragraph it would read, the board delegates the responsibility for coordinating the selection and making recommendations for the purchase of learning resources to the district or school educational staff, full stop. Sorry, here we go again. Requests for reconsideration of the use of learning resources will be undertaken in accordance with the process outlined in the associated regulation 6163.1. I'm just going to turn to the Secretary Treasurer, who I think is taking the note. Was that sufficiently clear? Okay. Did you want me to go through that one more time? We're good? Okay. Okay. And then the only other thing was at 4.2. So at this policy subcommittee, we talked about taking out the second part. So the second paragraph that starts with the notification to parents and provides suggestions for what would be included. And we talked about putting that in the regulation rather than in the policy. So we don't want to lose that. but we did talk about having that kind of specific direction about what would be in a notification letter to parents and guardians being in the regulation rather than the policy. And so I'm not sure if we want to recommend that to the committee tonight, but certainly that's what I recall. Okay. So yeah, that was it. Thanks for bearing with me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Trustee Duncan. At this point, how are we feeling in terms of moving this? Sorry, bear with me. I'm just pulling up. There it is. I printed off our agenda and then I forgot about it. Okay. The motion to bring this to the board. How are we feeling about moving it as amended? Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, I'm fairly confident that at this stage we're in pretty good shape. I think that any kind of further fine tuning of wording or making sure that maybe we've spoken a little more clearly to certain things, I'm fairly confident can be addressed between now and the board meeting, just in terms of emails, in particular from BCPAC, who we know has some particular feedback that they'd like the board to consider. From my perspective, I think one of the biggest things will be just sort of coming back with a regulation, assuming that this passes, and giving the superintendent some direction, just around the creation of a regulation. I think the regulation is going to be quite unique in that it'll maybe be more detailed than some of our regulations are, and I suspect that the board is going to want to see that back for review. So I have a suggested amendment to the motion if we do decide we want to move forward tonight.
Just noticed I was muted, sorry. Yeah, if someone would like to bring the motion to the table, Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, I'm happy to. If we're ready, then I'm absolutely happy to.
Yeah, I think we're at that point. So the motion moved by Trustee Duncan. Do we have any amendments to the motion?
Yeah, just a couple, just to take account of the fact that we've made some changes. So the motion would read that the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, approve the revised policy 6163.1 learning resources as amended, and then adding an "and further," as I like to do, and further direct the superintendent to prepare a corresponding learning resources administrative regulation for review by the Board of Education in April 2024. And I just, in moving that, I just wanted to sort of check in with the superintendent to make sure that that April 2024 timeline is realistic. So yeah, thanks, Chair.
First off, Secretary Treasurer, did you get all of that?
Yeah, I think I got that one. Yeah.
Awesome. And then Superintendent, did you want to comment on whether the timeline makes sense?
Yeah, I would. I'm looking at just as far as the budget process and the workload that is in front of us for that. And I'm hesitant that April gives us enough time, although I do recognize the importance of it. So I think I can make that work. I also recognize the importance of having many voices in this piece. So I think it will be in draft, obviously, with board direction, and then also seeking feedback from partner groups and VP, VPA.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you through the chair to the superintendent. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. I suspected as much. What I was foreseeing was that by April there would be a draft and then potentially a discussion about what kind of and consultation, if any, we want to do. So appreciate that there would be no way to do both the draft, prepare the draft for the board's consideration and consult. So really would just be looking to have a draft prepared for first the board's consideration and direction further or prior to any consultation we might want to do.
Superintendent?
Sorry, just to see clarity on that, with regards to the and further direct the superintendent to prepare, is that for the ed policy of April, or is that, I don't know if there was an April, but I'm not sure if there was a meeting specific.
I just left it open through the chair, just appreciating that's a really busy time and wasn't sure what, would work, frankly. So, yeah.
Appreciate the open.
Yeah.
Awesome. So at this point, we vote on the amended motion. We vote on the amended motion. All those in favor? And that is unanimous. And now we vote on the motion, which I can't read back because I don't have it written down.
Did you want me to read it, Chair?
Please.
Okay. That the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, approve revised policy 6163.1 learning resources as amended, and further direct the superintendent to prepare a corresponding learning resources administrative regulation for review by the Board of Education in April 2024.
Brilliant. Thank you, Trustee Duncan. Last chance for discussion. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Excellent. So that brings us to our C4, which is Trustee Kwan's motion that the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, direct the board chair to write a letter to the Ministry of Education and Childcare with a request for additional funding for staff to complete DEI training in line with the K-12 Anti-Racism Action Plan. Go ahead, Trustee Bayo.
Hi, yeah. Trustee Kwan wasn't able to be here today, so she asked if I could, I forget what it's called when you introduce support a motion, but so I'd like to move this motion. Yeah, and then I guess we can talk after.
Excellent. So the motion is moved by Trustee Bayo. And now the floor is open for discussion. Trustee Bayo.
Yeah, I'll say what the thinking is behind it. So essentially the Ministry of Education, sorry, what was that? Oh, okay. The Ministry of Education has provided the action plan as a key initiative for districts to dismantle systemic racism and discrimination. While the action plan provides training and resources to help educators understand what it means to be anti-racist, they have not provided replacement time nor funding towards this key initiative. In order for teachers to have the ability to look at the action plan together and discuss the ways we plan to implement it, we would like to ask the ministry to support the funding of that release time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that background, Trustee Bayo. I see Nissa Tamel's hand. Go ahead.
I just wanted to weigh in and say the BC PAC is really, really supportive of this motion going forward, and we were wondering how we could be connected on the parent engagement plan aspect and how we can help to engage with our members. So just a comment.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm not sure if anyone has insight about that at this very moment. And if not, I also see Lena Palermo's hand.
I just wanted to say the GVTA is very supportive of this as well. The action plan has been put in place. We need time for this training where all staff would be part of it. It's training, not professional development. And so I think that, yeah, we're very in favor of this for all employees.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you to Trustee Kwan and Trustee Bayo for bringing it forward. I also support the motion, and I think I really appreciated the action plan being included in the pack up again, because it's been a while since I read through it, and it was really useful to go through it again. And even something, you know, as straightforward as reading the last page, the action plan timetable, and going through and really thinking about where we are with each aspect of the plan. I think there's some work for us to do as a board in terms of ensuring the plan is moving forward, in addition to our discussion tonight, which I hope we can, you know, create some space to have that conversation. So yeah, thank you to you both, and I look forward to the vote.
Excellent. I see no other hands, so that brings us to the vote. All those in favor? And that is unanimous. The motion passes. Alrighty, that brings us to the end of the agenda. Would someone like to move to adjourn? Moved by Trustee David. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, so much, and we'll